So a few misconceptions about breathing. People talk about belly breathing, and I know they're well-intentioned. However, it's wrong. It drives me nuts because we have no lung tissue in our bellies. So you can't actually breathe into your belly. And in fact, the biomechanics of breathing actually is there's a split in our rib cage here because these ribs are designed to move. So on an inhalation, the emphasis should be more lateral because the ribs should externally rotate when we inhale and internally rotate when we exhale. The diaphragm attaches to the rib cage. It's a nice thin muscle. It runs down through your hip flexors. It attaches to your lumbar spine. So it's also a postural muscle. When you don't use it well for breathing, it becomes a pissed off breathing muscle, but also a pissed off postural muscle. Anybody have tight hip flexors or a tight low back? So that can be tied back to breathing. It's definitely the place to start, right? So there could be other factors going on, but you should definitely start with breathing first, fix that pattern. So money's in the exhale, really important. When you exhale, that your ribs come in, back, and down. When you inhale, so there are rib kinematics involved with breathing that you can leverage in mobility. So what's most of the movement that's happening with my ribs? Is it out? Is my stomach going out? Maybe a little bit, right? But my ribs are moving out laterally. So external rotation on the inhale, internal rotation on the exhale. Now I told you about the diaphragm. When it contracts, it flattens and moves down. What helps it flatten is that external rotation of your ribs. Unlike any other muscle in the body, it requires what's called a zone of apposition to relax. The only way it gets that zone is if these ribs can come in and form a cage, and then the diaphragm domes in that cage. But most of us, our ribs don't come in, back, and down because we're in a position like this all the time, right? So that means that muscle stays in a semi-contracted state. You can't take a full inhalation or exhalation. And then the only time you actually start to use it is if you focus on diaphragmatic breathing. So to everybody, that means like deep breathing. But that's not how it should be because just like any other muscle like the bicep, this is not the only way I use my bicep in full flexion. I should be using my bicep here too. And if I didn't, and I said, oh, I only use it for full flexion, I only use my diaphragm for diaphragmatic breathing, then when I need to go like this instead, I would go like that. That's what we're doing when we don't use our diaphragm for all of our breath. So instead, if our breathing's more shallow, we pull from here. And kind of memorize the position you're in, because when you recheck it, I want you to be in this position. All right, now we're going to do a modified side plank. I'm going to show you what it looks like. We're going to start on the left, and then we're going to do it on the right, and then we're going to come back and do it one more time on the left. And we're going to focus on breathing and internal rotation of the ribs. Remember I said money's in the exhalation? So it's going to be all about every time you exhale, you're going to bring these ribs in, back, and down, okay? And modified side plank where my elbow starts off way in. That's because I'm not going just in a straight line. I want to curve when I come up. My back knees bend at 90, they're stacked, and then I come up like this. My elbow started in so that it wouldn't end up out, and I'm in a curved position. My hand goes on these lower ribs. Every time I exhale, I tuck the ribs in, okay? 5 breaths like that. Come back down, just pull your elbow in a little bit more. This one, yeah, there you go. All right, so come up, guys, come up even higher. I didn't say it would be easy. Good. You inhale on this side, you exhale, you really tuck these ribs when you exhale. So I should be able to tell when you exhale, it should look kind of like a crunch. The right side should be easier. Make sure your setup is knees, hips, and shoulders in line. Elbow way in. I don't like your elbow position there. All right, lift it up. That's it, good. Inhalations, expand these ribs. Exhalations, tuck this. The diaphragm is actually a hemi-diaphragm, so when I'm telling them to focus inhalations on one side and exhalations on the other, you can actually do that. Don't drop your head so much. Yep. So nice and high. No booties out. Ribs are tucked in. Good job. Get as high as you can. I want a C curve, and now I want those ribs. Every time you exhale, internal rotation, almost like a crunch, but really focused on using your diaphragm for this. Good. Don't drop your head so much. I'll trust you. I'm not counting. Once you've done 5, bring it down. Let's recheck internal hip rotation. Jeez. Do you feel that?
Yeah, I had a little pain on the right side too.
And it's gone? That's nice. So, I mean, you're saying it's a side plank, how is this breathing? But the focus was on how do I get the ribs to move in a better position? What happens when our breathing is more chest-oriented and shallow, the whole rib cage gets lifted. Because remember, diaphragm stays here in a semi-contracted state. These guys are all now your breathing muscles. When this gets jacked up, it's like this open bowl syndrome, right? And remember, I told you the diaphragm's a postural muscle. So now it's pissed and it's tight and it's jacking up your hip flexors and your low back. It also has an asymmetrical attachment, thicker and longer on the right side, so sometimes it also pulls you in the right hip more. And then you counter rotate up here, and you've got an upper trap that's a little more angry on the left, and a bigger left pec. So if you guys, when you go home and you take your shirts off tonight, check it out. See if your rib flares a little bit more on the left, if your pec is a little bit bigger. It's all tied back to breathing, not pec firing up to 24,000 times a day to help you breathe.
In the college championship twice. To either win it and be a top 25, we got to do things that other teams aren't doing.
These coaches that just regurgitate one-size-fits-all type information, it's absolutely wrong.
Because without that character I've created, that John North character, the weights aren't going to go up.
Coaching allows you to see the best and worst of people and be able to bring out things inside of them that they never thought were possible.